There's such an intellectualism to a read because you're moving something from the realm of intimate interaction and you're placing it in a larger scheme of power dynamics, of social context, of historical precedent. She's trying to teach her audience, yes, you saw this video of this man making fun of me, but let me tell you the actual significance and why this is such a big deal. That is why it just feels so like, yes, I feel like I just went to a thesis defense. Welcome back to Grounded. I'm your host, Dr. Iman, your professor friend who turns to the study of religion and spirituality to answer questions big and small about this human experience that we are all having. And today we're asking why it feels so damn intellectually and spiritually good and fulfilling to read someone to filth, or to hear somebody read someone to filth. A question inspired by a read that has just been living rent-free in my head this week, and that is the Jules Lebron read of Jeffree Star. But before we get into that, I just want to check in with you guys about where I'm finding grounding today. I am feeling very good because I am back in my apartment in Atlanta. The semester has started. I had my first week of classes, and this is my second semester, even though it's technically the fall since last semester was my first semester. And the vibes are just feeling so much different, and I feel like better. I'm feeling so much better, this not being like my rookie semester. I'm feeling good about my classes. All of my classes have filled. My first semester, nobody knew who I really was, so I had really small classes, but my enrollment in all of my classes has more than doubled, in some cases tripled, honestly. And I'm just feeling good in that, and I'm feeling good being back in my apartment. I've learned to myself that if I go into the office 2 or 3 times a week on days that I teach, and then I work from home the majority of the rest of the week, and then I go out one day of the weekend. So basically I get 3 days of planned social interaction with other people and then 4 days to my own devices. That is just a chef's kiss formula for me. That just feels really good to me, especially during work week. So I'm finding grounded and getting back into my routine and being back here in Atlanta. Now, the question of the day is, why does it feel so damn good, spiritually fulfilling, itching your brain intellectually when you hear somebody read someone to filth, or when you yourself are doing the reading? It can be so cathartic. And I was reminded of this question and this feeling by watching Jools Lebron's read of Jeffree Star. The drama is deep, but just to give you a summary of it, it basically stems from Jules, who recently posted a TikTok and a GoFundMe asking for people to help her raise money so that she can have oral surgery because she is in desperate need of it and doesn't have the funds currently to do so. And for those of you guys who don't know, Jules Lebron is a social media creator, beauty content creator, all around truly is one of my favorite Black femmes on the internet, because I just feel there is such a light and an authenticity to her work. I talked about how she is just someone who every time I see her on the internet, I just love to see her stuff. So she's been very real about her journey with addiction. She was very real in this video about her addiction also led her to having issues with her teeth and her needing to basically have like complete replacement of all of her teeth, but how also addiction resulted in her sometimes mismanaging money, somebody who's coming out of poverty, not knowing things, what have you. She's been extremely, extremely transparent about her journey. There was lots of backlash to her making this video, but also tons and tons of affirmation. And the backlash was primarily from people who were saying, why don't you have the funds? Like, we know the extreme virality of very demure, very mindful must have gotten you a bag. Where's that bag? How come you're asking people? But then there were people who were her supporters and extremely happy to support her. And Jeffree Star, unfortunately, fell on the side of being very critical. He is just a noted racist, a noted transphobe, and just got on the internet essentially mocking her for the video that she made and just the state that she currently is in. So then she got on the internet and she read him for filth. Here is an excerpt of just a part that is sticking with me.
Jeffree, I am going to come for you in my wig cap, unfortunately. So when Jeffree was going viral and he was big in his cosmetics era, I was knowing all the behind the scenes tea about him. When he was coming on here, oh, I've never said this, and I've never been racist, and I've never drank a sip of alcohol. Girl, I knew that was a damn lie. And it didn't matter to you at the time because I didn't have the following or the background to back me up. And then when I did start finally blowing up, I started blowing up with the same people that you had to work your ass off to get closer to. And all it took was 2 or 3 videos for me to do it. I became friends with the people that you worked so hard to become friends with in a matter of months. What took you years. And that bothers you. And I know it bothers you because one of my first controversies was talking about this. And guess what, Jeffree? You might be white and able-bodied and thin-bodied, but let's make it clear. I've accomplished things in my career that you've never accomplished. Beyonce will never shout you out. The likes of celebrities of Lindsay Lohan, Jennifer Lopez, Jamie Lee Curtis, the president, and the vice president will never acknowledge you because you're not that girl. Even with millions of dollars in the bank account, you're not that girl. Even with all the property under your belt, you're not that girl. Yeah, I might have come on the internet and begged to get my teeth fixed, but you wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for the likes of people like me who bought those lipsticks 10 years ago. Your problem is with the system. You thought that because you did so much that you were gonna get it all, and you didn't. You never got the public recognition you wanted because you're racist. So yeah, it does bother you when a black and Puerto Rican girl from the hood who probably gets all the trade that you're having to pay for is getting all the flowers from everyone.
Now, the content of this read, as I interpret it, is all about betrayal. It's Jules' betrayal of the myth of the influencer and bursting this bubble that people think that virality actually translates into the kind of material capital gains that people think it does. It's also blowing up the myth that for a lot of folks, when you get your first piece of money, if you're black and brown and you don't necessarily have the kind of financial literacy or you're going through things, people don't necessarily have the opportunity to mess up and keep going. So what I love about this is Jules is betraying this myth of the influencer who has all of the things, has all of the money, has all of the designer, all of this stuff. She's bursting the bubble that social media and folks, want you to think, which is virality equals an actual material change in your life. And as Jules has shown us, that is not the case. And what I love about Jules' read of Jeffree is that she is pointing out to a feeling of betrayal that he feels, him feeling betrayed, that just because he had the wealth and he had the virality, he never got the kind of privilege associated with it. He never got the kind of influence and the kind of embrace from people who embraced Jules that he would have liked to be in the same circles of and be received in the same way. But what I really want to focus on is not necessarily the content of this video and what is happening here, but the form itself, and the form being the read. A read. We all know when you read someone, when you let them know what's up. And we know what a read is, right? We know that a read is when, in my mind, is somebody speaking truth to power. I think a read is a kind of speech act that I think deserves its own categorization, because sometimes people are reacting to things. I think sometimes people are responding to things. I think sometimes folks are degrading people. And that to me does not necessarily make a read. For me, a read is when somebody is punching up. They're not punching across, they're not punching down, and they're punching up. And as they're doing so, they're speaking truth to power. They're making you see something about the dynamics at play, about why this person is saying what they're saying. Jules is talking about Jeffree is saying what he's saying because he's got beef with other black and brown content creators. He's saying this because he is jealous of her as a black woman who got embraced by all these other people that he didn't, right? So she is speaking truth to power and naming a racial dynamic and anti-black dynamic that actually informs how Jeffree Star is responding to her and how Jeffree Star is receiving her asking her supporters for help with healthcare. Because also, let's be for real, you could also have a full-time job. And, thankfully I have dental insurance. My dental insurance, I have a huge deductible. Not a huge deductible, but like $2,500. That's a large deductible. And what comes in dental insurance is 2 cleanings and maybe a tooth pull. Let's also not try to act like if you have a full-time job, and that's what people were really critical of Jules, that saying like, oh, well, you need to get a job and just get dental insurance. No, dental insurance does not cover a complete replacement of your teeth. Can you imagine if dental insurance actually covered that? It doesn't. So like, what are we talking about? But anyways, so for me, this read, right? Jules is punching up. She's talking about the racial dynamics and the class dynamics that are actually making Jeffree Star angry and are informing the way that he is responding to essentially her plea for help and her plea for support. And to me, that is the best of the reads. There's the podcast, The Read. What I love about what the hosts, Kid Fury and Crystal, do is that every episode, right, they end the episode with a read. And what they're so good at doing, and this is why I think their show has been so successful for so long, is that when they are reading things, whether they be political, whether they be cultural, whether they be a lived experience that they're having, is that they're always punching up and exposing the audience that they have through their popularity to power dynamics that are at play. And that to me is what makes a read a real read, right? You can read somebody, let's say, but like it's you're managing someone and you read somebody who works for you. That's not a read. That is degrading. Or you can, let's say you're just insulting someone. That's not a read. That's just insulting someone. So I love this idea of thinking about a read as a Black queer speech act that speaks truth to power. So when I see somebody like Jules, right, a Black woman, a Black trans woman, get on the internet who, is also of Puerto Rican descent, get on the internet and give such a read to somebody in her industry, right? I see that as so intellectual and so spiritual at the same time. So why do I see it that way? Why does it feel that way? I just want to think with you guys about how this idea of a read why it just feels so good and why it just moves me. And I'm like, yeah, whenever I hear it. And the first bit of it is that there is an intellectualism to it. In order to read someone, you need to be able to understand the social dynamics and the power dynamics that inform the world that they are creating through their actions. That takes a particular kind of sight, right? And it also requires you seeing yourself as a part of somebody else's world. And so this is a very Black Studies 101, but this idea of been around for almost over 100 years, coined by W.E. Du Bois, that of double consciousness, right? And the idea of double consciousness, there's also multiple consciousness, triple consciousness, is the idea that you can see, you're conscious of who you are, but then you're also conscious of how other people are perceiving you. So you have a double consciousness, the consciousness of who you are. Let's say I have the consciousness of who I am as Iman. And then I have a double consciousness, a triple, quadruple consciousness, what have you, by being able to recognize how somebody is seeing me as a Black person, as a woman, as a Muslim woman, what have you. So you move about the world conscious of who you are, but also knowing sometimes it actually doesn't matter your consciousness and who you are because people are perceiving you in a way as if you have a different consciousness, if that makes sense. That's a basic understanding to it. So to me, in order to be able to really pull off a read, you need to be particularly conscious of who you are and then how somebody's perception of you is not actually matching up to who you are and what you're doing. And then you need to be able to be conscious of who they are and the kinds of worlds that their actions perpetuate, the kinds of power dynamics, whether it be transphobic, racist, classist, what have you. There's such an intellectualism to a read because you're moving something from the realm of an interpersonal or an intimate interaction, and you're placing it in a larger scheme of power dynamics, of social context, of historical precedent. What do scholars do if not take a case, perhaps the history of this pen, for example, or the history of these flowers, right? And show you the bigger world that this flower, that this pen, that this mic, that this person sitting in front of you represents. So when we apply that to Jools Lebron's read of Jeffree Star, she's not just saying this person is being mean to me, right? That's not necessarily a read. She read him because she talked about the racial dynamics, the class dynamics, the privileges that informed why he responded the way he did, right? So she's not just saying you're being mean, she's putting everything he's doing in that one like 90-second video of his into a larger context. And at the same time, right, she's also exposing something. I'm learning something about the beauty industry and beauty influencer culture, right? So she's placing him on multiple levels into a larger landscape. And in that video, teaching her audience how to interpret a situation, right? She's trying to teach her audience, yes, you saw this video of this man making fun of me, but let me tell you the actual significance and why this is such a big deal. And to me, that is that is intellectualism, right? That is why it just feels so like, yes, I feel like I just went to a thesis defense after seeing that read because I just got so much out of it. I learned something from it. It taught me how to see something that I wouldn't have been capable of seeing beforehand. Shout out to Mama for doing that. And here's why it feels also really spiritual for me. We can talk about Jools Lebron reading Jeffree Star, but also whenever I see truly any Black femme, any queer person reading anyone. And that is because there's a certain discourse out there, often when Black women, Black queer folks go onto the internet and they read a situation that they've been in. Often they're turning to the internet and their people to talk about a situation through a group that can understand them. That takes nuance to understand because people think that people post to the internet or people who create content post to the internet because they just want everyone to see it. I think the idea that you post content and that everyone has access to it is just a byproduct, when in reality, in my experience, when Black femmes and queer folks go to the internet to air something out, it is often to air it out in community with people who look like them. Frequently hear this quote by Toni Morrison, frequently misused, that says, and I'm like paraphrasing, it's something along the lines of, racism, anti-Blackness works so well because it distracts you from the work at hand. It is a quote that is often employed to dismiss Black folks from reading people, from naming what is happening to them, right? It sees that naming as a distraction or as frivolous. When, in my experience, how I see reads and people going on the internet, and even how I use the internet myself as somebody who creates content, as a consumer of it, is that it's often a way of expressing and getting collective affirmation of an experience that you had, and a kind of affirmation that you would not be able to have otherwise. So it feels spiritual to me because it's cathartic, right? It's a means of collectively processing something with people who look like you and who will understand when you don't necessarily have that large network of people in your personal life who would extend the same understanding. So for me, it just feels deeply spiritual because it is giving language both to your experience, but also giving language to other people who then are able to use those reads, right? To be like, well, I recognize myself in that because I have experienced something like that, right? I think a lot of people can recognize themselves in what Jules Lebron did because you've had an experience where someone is talking down to you. You've had an experience where a white person is jealous of you, or somebody above you is jealous of you and is acting crazy. I certainly have had those experiences. And so there's a kind of shared collective energy and a collective experience about it that is both cathartic. It feels like it moves through you. I feel like I could feel Jules's energy, moving through her. And that's another thing that feels deeply spiritual about it. When someone is reading someone, they're truly in a flow state. And so much of the spiritual is about connecting the individual to the environment, to the collective. We can think about Black feminists and Black women's religious history as always being, thinking about the I as a we. So inherently it feels spiritual because it feels like, even though it's one person making a video in a solo monologue speech act, right? A read is a solo monologue speech act, but it's at the same time a collective one, in that it feels cathartic and it feels good to both the listener and the person doing it because, right, you're intellectualizing this interaction by placing it into a larger historical precedent, social context, what have you. And so by doing that, you're making your experience something larger and making the I a we. You just cannot tell me that when someone is reading someone, when you hear Jules in that video, that short, like 2-minute video, she is in a flow state. You can just tell it. Everything is coming fast, right? This is a particular kind of speech act that she's doing. And why I say it's a flow state is because I also think about this idea of channeling. It's something that I write about in my work, in my dissertation. And what does it mean to channel something? And I think people think like, okay, there's mediumship, and that's you being a medium for, let's say, another entity, someone living, a collective that's not in this material world, what have you. You're a medium for something on the other side, someone who's passed away, a family member, what have you. But I think channeling is really unique in that you witness, for example, Jules in this flow state, and she's channeling, and you see that what she's channeling is not something that's not of this world, but you can tell she is channeling years of her personal experience with this person. She is channeling the intellectualism that she knows about how messed up it is, how Jeffree Star operates in the industry, but also how he's treating her as a Black trans woman, right? She is channeling memory, she's channeling experience, she's channeling history and thinking about the historical precedent of what it means for a white man to talk down to a Black woman like this. And so it's a flow state, and it feels spiritual because it feels like so much is moving through her, right? The gravity of the situation isn't just one video making fun of her. The gravity of the situation is years worth of her personal experience, but also a deep history that we can trace back to enslavement, right? That we can trace back centuries of this kind of talk, this kind of degradation of Black women. And so that to me is like, that to me also makes it feel very spiritual. There's a flow state, there's a channeling. This read is a culmination of so much more than just that one interaction. Now, what also makes me feel like this is spiritual is because when I look at that read, I have seen those speech acts before. Were they called reads at the time? No. A read is a 21st century word for the kind of speech that has been happening in this country amongst Black people and amongst Black women since we got here at the turn of modernity, right? We can think of the Black preacher in Fire and Brimstone. We can think of what Black feminist thought has theorized as sass. We can think about what bell hook talks about as the importance of talking back. Black history is full of all of these speech acts of people speaking truth to power. And in particular, Black religious history also has all of these moments, right? Black religious history, if anything, is defined by folks speaking truth to power. That is a fact. That is a characterization of Black religion within the United States. So when I hear Jools Lebron, I hear her, but I also hear, for example, I think about, different contexts, but you can just think about it in a similar way in terms of the kind of speech act that it is. I'm thinking about Sojourner Truth, Ain't I a Woman, right? A speech that is in it asking a rhetorical question. What's more giving read than a rhetorical question that she's going to give you an answer to, right? I hear, Ain't I a Woman? And as we know, Sojourner Truth, she gives this speech in Akron, Ohio, talking about how her Blackness, her experience as an enslaved woman, how that challenges this very idea of who a woman is. We have this at the time, there's a very Victorian, white woman-centered understanding of who a woman is. And so in this speech, Ain't I a Woman, and I'll link it in the notes, she is talking about how her Blackness disqualifies her from a womanhood as we know it today, which is the exclusive domain of white women. She's talking about, I plow and I sow, I lift heavy things. Ain't I a woman? And so we might, if Sojourner Truth was giving that speech, let's say on TikTok in 2026, we might be like, that's a read, girl. Or we can think of even like folks like Malcolm X. I think of Malcolm X's message to the grassroots, right? And his critique that he gives this speech in Detroit in the 1960s. People like him and other activists with similar politics like him, Black nationalists, have been kicked out of this Black organizing convention. And he gives a speech that says, look, whether you're a Mason, a Christian, what have you, at the end of the day, you catch hell because you're Black. He's reading the conference organizers Again, in the 1960s, there wasn't the word the read, but if we heard it, when we hear it today, if I were to give that speech to students, they'd be like, oh, he's reading these people for filth, right? But also making a collective call. Still employing a speech act that is speaking truth to power and is trying to get people to see an everyday interpersonal experience as having and representing something much bigger than this one thing. That is a fundamental part of Black religious history. So when I see Jules Lebron reading Jeffree Star for filth, I can't help but to hear all of the Black folks who I know, all of the Black folks who are at the center of studies of Black religion in the United States, as employing similar rhetorical strategies and also reading people for filth who lived amongst them during their lifetime. Again, different contexts, different kinds of stakes, different kinds of actors. But what I'm saying is there's a long history of speaking truth to power as being a Black spiritual act within the United States. And I bring that up because this is me trying to make sense of like, damn, why did that feel like spiritual? Why did that feel so intellectual? So this is just me thinking with you guys about why that was. And I think it's because it is spiritual and it is intellectual, as we've just talked about. So that was me getting into a little bit of the drama, having a different kind of episode this week, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. And today I am finding grounding in that I am getting a really good sense of what my value add is to the social media space in particular. And all that to say is you guys should all follow me at Iman, Iman Abdk, Iman Abdk on YouTube, on Instagram. And it's all in an effort to use social media as an extension of my public scholarship, as an extension of this podcast, to bring people into the kind of thinking that I would do with students who are paying $60,000 a year for a liberal arts education with you all, free and open access. That is a really important part to me. And I'm just getting such a better idea of the kinds of things folks want to see from me. So like I posted a post about a moment that I had in my study of Islam class. The title is I love teaching Islam at an HBCU, but so many people were asking for my syllabus for the semester. And I was like, okay, that is something people want to see from me. And when I think back on it too, I used to do the 3 books that changed my thinking on here or my thinking on X, Y, and Z. And so I'm just getting a good sense of that. And I'm feeling grounding in that because I feel like I'm actually meeting people's intellectual needs. And that's the whole part of this, is being able to do work in a way that meets people's intellectual needs when we are in a landscape where people are trying to convince us that people don't care about their intellectualism. And certainly we live in an anti-intellectualism era, but now more than ever, I think people want things that feel good in their brain, things that feel good spiritually, things that add a depth to the level of human experience that we are encountering, things that teach them about how this world works, histories that are not normally told, and what have you, what have you. So it just feels good to feel like that project of being on social media and creating content, I'm getting much more clarity on how it can be useful. And that's also leading to more engagement and what have you. So that is where I'm leaving Finding Grounding. And I invite you guys to follow me, like I said, at IamAnABDK. If you have a question for an episode that you would like me to answer, I'm answering questions big and small about this human experience that we are sharing by turning to my work as a scholar and a professor and expert in the study of religion and spirituality. So no question is too big, no question is too small. And you can send me an email at groundedwithdriman@gmail.com or DM if you want me to think with you about that question. So I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful day. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you here on Monday again. Bye-bye.